Hi, we're continuing our conversation about Word tables, and basically this video is going to cover how we can merge and split cells and how we can change the row and column, the row heights and the column widths, as well as a few other formatting options. So if you remember when we created this table up top here, I indicated to you that we typed in Table 1 consumer spending just in this cell, but what we really want to do is make it so that it becomes across all of, it's really a heading for like all of the columns, right? So I'm going to select this row of data. So I just sort of highlight it across, okay? I'm going to go to my Layout, Table Tools, Layout tab. And I notice in this Merge section, this is where we're going to be focusing, I'm going to select this Merge Cell. So what that does is it takes all of the selected cells and it merges them into one cell. So now you can see instead of having 4 separate cells, I have simply one cell, which is kind of cool. All right, so a couple other things that I want to be able to do here. For example, I'm going to position the pointer just outside the left edge here of row 2, and I'm going to select all of these remaining rows. So see where my pointer is to the left? And I'm just going to drag down, and that's going to select all of the rows except that initial row that I had. And what I want to do is adjust the height of each of these. So right now you can see in the layout the height is set at 0.35. And I'm going to use my little spinner button. I'm going to spin it down to 0.3. But just know that you can increase or decrease the width of your rows simply by spinning it up or down. Or you could highlight it and just type in the number that you want it to be. Okay, so now I'm going to position my pointer just inside the left edge of the third row here. And I'm going to drag down to select just the contents of this first column. And the reason for this is what I want to be able to do is I want to have 2 columns here underneath. So I'm going to have it be age and category. And I'm going to have there be 2 columns just in this highlighted section. So not in the age cell or in the table 1. So what I want to do is basically take each of these cells and split them into 2 cells. So for every 1 cell that was there, I now want to split them so that there's 2 cells for each row. And so once I have that the cells highlighted that I want to have the split, I'm going to click on Split Cells. And here's the important thing. So number 1, you want to tell it how many columns you want to split it into. I want to split it into 2 columns. Right now it's 1 column. And I want to do it for the 7 rows. It knows 7 rows because that's what's highlighted. And here's the key thing. Do you see here where it says merge cells before split? You want to make sure that's not checked, because otherwise it's going to make it really funky because it's going to try to merge all of these into one cell and it's not going to be right. Okay, so I want to have that be unchecked and I'm going to click OK. And you can see that what it does is it just basically creates that additional cell. Now I'm going to undo this just for a second so that you can see the difference here. So if I were to do split cells and I didn't uncheck that, watch what happens. See how it looks really funky? Big, big difference. So you want to make sure, oops, I'm going back too far here. You want to make sure basically that when you do it, you just highlight what you want. You pick split cells. You uncheck that merge cells before split and then click OK. And so it looks much better that way. All right, so here what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, this is age, and then we're going to give it a category that corresponds to our ages. And so, for example, I'm going to do 101, and I'm just hitting the down arrow here, and I'm just putting in a category for each of these. Really, this is sort of pointless other than to show you that you could use the down arrow if you're trying to enter information from row to row. The real key here is that you understand how to split cells. Okay. Now we want to look at some alignment. I'm going to select this second row of my table. So I'm going to use my mouse pointer. You notice how it's a white arrow when it's to the left of the row. And I just simply click and that whole row becomes highlighted. Sort of like when we were selecting a paragraph or a line in a regular Word document. When you move your mouse pointer to the left of it and click, it highlights the whole line. All right, so we're going to go here to we want to center these. Now this is different than the center that you learned on the Home tab for a paragraph. That's a much different center. This is centering within our cells. So that's on the Layout tab here, and you see in the Alignment section, you have all of these different options. So you have Align Top Left, you have Align Top Center, you have Align Top Right. So basically this one is aligned center left, this is center center, this is center right. I don't need to read each of these to you, but here's what you want to be thinking of. When you have, you're centering not just left to right, but up and down. So when this says top left, it means the top left of the cell, which you can really see very well if your row height is really tall. You're used to doing centering left to right, but this is also talking about up and down. So for our case here, we want to do center center, which means it's going to center it left to right, but it's also going to center it up and down. And again, I'll just show you here that if I were to have a big height on this, you can really see how it's centering it in the cell. It's a little harder to tell when the cell width is only 0.3, but as it gets thicker, you can see it a little bit better. So that's what they mean by align center. Okay, now we're going to select the remaining numbers here. So you notice all I'm doing is just clicking the start of where I want it to be and just dragging to the right and down. And this one I want to do an align center right so that my numbers will be centered but over to the right. So they're centered up and down but over to the right hand side. Let's see. All right, next what we're going to do is we're going to learn about how we can quickly make our table a little bit more exciting than it currently does now. I want to select the table, so I'm going to click on that little table selector. And now, instead of being on the Layout tab, we're going to go over to the Table Tools Design tab. And I see here that I have table styles, and we've learned about styles and how they can quickly format our document. We're going to talk more about styles in the next chapter and some of the powers behind them. But in this case, these are table styles, and you'll notice what happens when you move your mouse pointer over to them, that they basically change the look of our table. So we have grid tables, we have list tables, and so you basically just want to follow the directions for whichever type of table they tell you that you want to select. And they are in some sort of sequence of order. So you see here, this is list table for accent 1. So then this is list table for accent 2, which is the one I'm going to select. And you can see how it quickly sort of formats our table a certain way. And I want to point out here that on the Design tab that you have these table style options. So you notice for this particular style that I selected, that header row, banded rows, and first column come checked. What this means is that the header row is going to look a little different than the rest of the rows. Banded rows means every other color. That's what gives this effect of every other color. Every other row is a different color. Okay. And then first column, notice how this first column is bolded. So for example, if I uncheck first column, then it wouldn't make that column look any different than any of the other columns. Does that make sense, hopefully? And for example, banded rows would make the banded rows go away. If I chose banded columns, it would do every other column is a certain color. So it gives you some flexibility. You can pick the style, but then you can further customize it by changing those table style options. All right, next what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to center the whole table. And in order to do this, I need to look at the properties for the table. So I'm going to click on the table itself, and on the Layout tab, I'm going to go to Properties. And I see here that I can make the whole table be aligned to the left, I can align it to the center, or I can align it to the right. So this is important to know. This is not changing the alignment within the cells. It's actually making the table centered within the whole document itself. So I'm going to pick centered, and then I'm going to click OK. And for this particular table, you really don't see a change. And the reason for that is because it's literally taking up the whole space between the margins.